January 3rd, 1943. 22,000 feet over Saint-Nazaire, France. A flak shell tears through a B-17 bomber and rips the parachute off the back of a 23-year-old gunner from New Jersey. The plane is already coming apart around him. In the next 90 seconds, Alan Magee will fall more than 4 miles straight down, with nothing between him and the ground but cold air. Magee enlisted right after Pearl Harbor. He wanted to be a pilot. The Army said no. At 5'7" and 155 pounds, he was built for something else entirely. The ball turret of a B-17 Flying Fortress, a cramped plexiglass sphere bolted to the belly of the plane, just big enough for one man, folded into a crouch, with two .50 caliber machine guns between his knees. It was called the fetal position. That was not a metaphor. That was the job. On January 3rd, 1943, Magee climbed into that turret for the 7th time. The target? German U-boat pens at Saint-Nazaire, a heavily defended port the bomber crews called Flak City. No one called it that as a joke. The bomber's name was painted on the nose in cheerful letters. Snap, crackle, pop, named by a pilot who used to work for Kellogg. 85 bombers in formation, climbing toward a target that had never once been knocked out, no matter how many times America tried. This is where it changes. Over the target, the sky turns black with flak. German anti-aircraft fire found the ball turret first. Flak tore through the plexiglass and wounded Magee inside it, knocking the turret out of action. He climbed out, bleeding, and reached for his chest parachute, only to find it had been shredded by the same shrapnel that had hit him. There was no second parachute. There was only the bomb bay, and another crewman waiting his turn to jump. A second flak strike tore off part of the right wing. The bomber rolled into a violent spin. Inside, the world stopped making sense. Smoke pouring through the cabin, the oxygen system failing, gauges spinning past numbers that meant nothing anymore. Starved of oxygen at altitude, Magee began to lose consciousness. The centrifugal force of the spinning aircraft did what no decision ever could have. It threw him out of the plane, unconscious, no chute, 22,000 feet up. Here's where it gets strange. A British tail gunner named Nicholas Alcemade would survive almost the same fall a year later, 18,000 feet, no parachute, into a snowbank. But Alcemade chose to jump. Magee did not choose anything. He was simply gone from the aircraft, falling through 4 miles of January sky, and there was nothing left to do but fall. At his size and weight, Magee would have reached a terminal velocity near 120 miles per hour. The fall itself took roughly 2 minutes. 2 minutes is a long time to be unconscious and falling. By his own account, given decades later, he woke briefly during the descent, long enough to say a single sentence to no one. "I don't wish to die, because I know nothing of life." Then the cold and the thin air took him again, and he went under. Doctors who later studied the case noted one detail that may have saved him. Unconsciousness can prevent the kind of muscle tension that turns survivable impacts into fatal ones. A relaxed body sometimes survives what a braced one cannot. That is not courage. That is not training. That is the body doing something the mind had no say in. Below him stood the Saint-Nazaire railroad station, its roof a vast dome of glass and steel girders, built decades before anyone imagined what it might one day catch. He fell straight toward it. Magee crashed through the glass roof of the station, smashing through steel girders before coming to rest, broken, on the floor below. German soldiers found him still tangled in the wreckage of the skylight and found him, impossibly, alive. The damage to his body was almost beyond counting. 28 shrapnel wounds, a shattered nose, damage to his eye, a punctured lung, damaged kidneys, a fractured right leg and ankle, his right arm hanging on by threads of tissue. He had fallen 4 miles through open sky without a parachute, and the only thing standing between him and the ground had been a train station roof. When he regained consciousness in a first aid station, surrounded by the men who had just spent the morning trying to kill him, Magee said, "Thank God I'm alive." What happened next is the part of this story Americans rarely expect. A German military doctor took charge of his case and told him directly, "We are enemies, but I am first a doctor, and I will do my best to save your arm." He kept that promise. The arm was saved. Magee spent 2.5 months in that hospital, treated by his own account with genuine tear. He never learned the doctor's name. he never got the chance to thank him properly. From the hospital, Magee was sent to a German POW camp, where he remained a prisoner until Allied forces liberated him in May 1945. For his service, Magee received the Air Medal and the Purple Heart. After the war, he earned his pilot's license, the job the Army had once told him he was too small for, and spent his career in aviation. Decades later, he went back to Saint-Nazaire and stood beneath that same glass roof, looking up at the place that should have killed him. He did not call it a miracle. He simply said, "I thought it was much smaller." Alan Magee died in San Angelo, Texas, on December 20th, 2003, at the age of 84. The people of Saint-Nazaire never forgot him. In 1993, they raised a memorial to him and his crew at the spot where the bomber went down. He did not survive that fall because he was brave. He survived it because the body, the roof, and a German doctor's quiet decency all happened to align for one American sergeant on one January afternoon. America still stands because some men carried the war on their backs, and others simply lived through it, against every law of physics that says they shouldn't have. Subscribe so these men are never forgotten.